Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast. We're glad you've chosen to join us for another week. And I'm excited to welcome our guest today. This is David Grau Sr., and he comes to us from Lexington, Kentucky. And he is an author, he's a consultant, and he focuses mainly on the internal business transition. So David, take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit more about this internal transition that you're talking about. And don't forget to mention the book that you've just published as well.
Sure. Thank you, Shawn. And thank you for having me here. This is a real delight. I'm watching some of your podcasts and they're excellent. Well done. I am not an exit planning strategist. I am not about selling what you build. What I do is I work on internal transitions. So what's that mean? Well, it all starts with this simple but pretty logical concept. For most small business owners, the work that they do, the passion that they have for the work and the small business that they run, it's the single largest, most valuable asset that they own. And I don't mean just by it brings money home. Sure, it pays all the bills, but it also has value off, to the side. It is a valuable enterprise. So why give that up? Internal transitions is 2 things. One, when you start a small business, it often begins founder dependent. I help people become founder independent. That doesn't necessarily mean more owners. It does mean a better, stronger team that you trust and give authority to. And once you've accomplished that step, the next step is, as you get older and you start to think about slowing down a little, most small business owners aren't very good at retirement, case in point. But as you get older and you think about slowing down, what if you set your business up to sell 10, 20, 30% of it to a key employee, to 2 key employees, to a son or a daughter? And that's the second step of the internal transition. So you choose who you sell it to, when you sell it, and you do it gradually. That's what I do. I call it internal transition planning.
Love it. That's a great approach, and I appreciate the efforts that you're doing to help people hold on to a tremendous asset that they've spent years or maybe even a lifetime developing and creating. So I love that approach. All right, well, let's jump to our questions then. David, our first question, how can leaders create and nurture a psychologically safe environment for their team?
In fact, my most recent book, The Founder's Treadmill, is about that. And where it starts is to say, listen, founder, when you start a small business, you got to survive. And a lot of times that means you have to do everything. And unfortunately, that also means you probably don't trust anybody to do most of the work except you. And so that's the answer to how you don't create a psychologically safe environment for your team. So my book is about how you get that right. And so the first thing I think you have to realize is you're a hard worker as a small business owner. That's a given. And you have a passion for what you do. You have certainly some experience and education in the service or the products you want to build or deliver. That's great. But where you stand today isn't the skill set that you'll have in 5 years or 10 years. You don't naturally step in and become a great leader, a great owner. Passion and hard work, they don't do that for you. They help you survive. But eventually what you have to do is hire people who are as good or better than you. And you have to trust them. In addition, you have to have a direction. So how does somebody follow you if you're not sure where you're going? And survival, making the ends meet, paying all the bills and payroll, well, that's not really a direction. That's a task well accomplished. But at some point, you have to have a real clear, mission, vision, value statement that other people can read and get behind. So yeah, they come to work to make a living, but to live a good life, you have to have something more than just making money. And as a founder, you're probably not God's gift to leadership in your first 2 years. You have to learn that and you have to move beyond it. And so if you want to create something, that's a good psychologically safe environment for your team, and which might also include maybe even a son or daughter, they have to get better at your skill set of leadership. You have to build the foundations of a business that are built to last, a business that can run without you working 90 hours a week and always being tired and always trying to figure out where the next dollar is coming from. So my book, The Founder's Treadmill, it's not about slowing down. It's about taking time just to step back for a moment and do it right. And let's, I like to say about my book, you can read it on a weekend and start to apply it on Monday morning. You'll still be applying it 10 years later, but it will help you get where you're going. And it will help others not only follow you, but support you. I think you have to be open to that. That's
Yes,
part of being a great leader.
absolutely. No, I could not agree more. And that's hard. And that's why you're doing what you're doing as far as that internal transition is the founders have to be willing to let go and trust a little bit. And they have to create, in order for that to happen, they have to create the psychological safety for them to transfer that.
Chapter 2 of the book is my own story. Something you said kind of triggered that thought in my mind. It's my own story, how I went through and ran on 2 different business treadmills and had a devil of a time figuring out how to give up. It's not easy. I've got 11 years of college. I don't think I took a single class in business school or law school
Yeah, it's
on
not
how to
there.
get off that treadmill.
Yeah, it's not there. Yeah, and that's just it. We have to figure it out, and that's why people like you are so helpful because we need the founders to understand those
Pleasure.
principles. Well, question number 2. Obviously, David, we have a lot of people that influence us as we're growing up, whether we're children, teenagers, younger years, older years. As you think about all those people, is there one person that you can think of? And then what is one word you would use to describe that person that has had that positive influence on you?
Um, yeah, and I don't mean this as a negative, but I think back to my first job. I lived in northern Indiana, southern Michigan, and all my family worked at Whirlpool Corporation, and they're in St. Joe, Michigan, and Benton Harbor, and that's where my family's from. So came out of high school, everybody went to work at Whirlpool, and I worked for this really tough supervisor, and this, the other people in the office called him the dinosaur. I loved him, but he wasn't really open to change or to teaching a lot. And so my answer to your question is, what's the one word I took away from that experience? As I grew older and started to become an owner, I wanted to be receptive. Receptive to ideas, receptive to change. I didn't want to be the loudest or only voice in the room as we talked about or we brainstormed about how to solve problems. I wanted to hear from other people. And honestly, I found as I grew older and I slowly got better at being a leader, I learned how to hire people who, in their given task, were better than me. And I loved the ideas that some of these people came up with. I went into the meeting thinking I had it figured out. I almost always came out with better idea by being receptive. I think that is important, and I think it is incredibly hard. I think people say, I'm good at change, but they're not. But they don't really want to change.
Oh, it's very true. And that's such a great word, receptive. And it's interesting to hear some of the background that you just were kind enough to share about why that word has become so meaningful to you. Because it does make a big difference. It makes a huge difference when you're in a leadership capacity to be receptive and just listen and perhaps consider seriously some of the ideas that people are giving you, because that's a big part of teamwork. That's a big part of progress and innovation is letting others take a moment in the spotlight for just a little bit and share ideas and be receptive to that. So great word. Love that. Question number 3, let's talk a little bit about fostering a growth mindset. Now, this could apply to either a leader themselves as an individual or how they can kind of foster that in their team. But talk to us a little bit about this idea of a growth mindset, which ironically dovetails very well with what you just talked about.
So I think um, I'm a small business mechanic. That's kind of how I market myself. I work with small businesses. Typical client anywhere from 2 people to 25. And what I find is that when you talk about growth, the first thing that people think of is top line revenue. I get it. You've got to survive, or there's really no next step. But
Right.
survival and isn't the end of the growth idea. Growth, I think, has to start with the founder. That's why I wrote the founder's treadmill. And again, when I get on a consulting call with a small business owner, they always want everyone else to grow. They want everyone else to make the changes and adapt, adjust, or to dismiss them and hire somebody better. I think, and I know from my own experience, when you start a small business, you think, well, I am who I am, and I am the kind of leader I am, and I'm honorable, I'm hardworking, and I had passion to start this small business. Now, just follow me. That's not a leader. That's not growth.
Right.
That's day one. And the idea is that you need to get better at what you do, not work harder, not work longer hours, but to build a team around you that you don't hire for help, you hire for capacity, you hire for authority, and you trust them to make decisions. You don't give them free rein, but you trust them to make decisions. Most importantly, you trust them to get things wrong on occasion. That's growth. And for most founders, that's a bridge too far. And so part of the consulting work I do, and the reason I wrote, my most recent book, it's only been out for about a month now, is I think I have to learn how to grow and self-assess and get better at being a leader, at being an owner, and sometimes just to get out of the way.
Yes. Yes,
Easier
that's the
said
hard
than
part.
done.
Yes, and I agree completely with what you said earlier. That sometimes leaders, you fall into the trap of thinking that we know it all or that we don't have no more growth to experience. And that's just not the case. And that's why it's so important to do some self reflection on what am I doing as a leader to foster my own growth and turn around and share that growth experience with others and also enable them to have growth experiences. Because that's where it's all going to come together is when we're all growing and working together. And that to me is the hallmark of what leadership really is leading the way and empowering people to grow and to get better. And I like what you also said about being able to get better at what you do without necessarily having to work harder. In fact, it should be the other way around. We get better at something, it gets easier. And so that's really what we're after.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 4, a question that is more popular in today's culture and work and whatnot to talk about emotional well-being, emotional wellness. What are some ideas that you have on how leaders specifically can maintain effective emotional wellness for themselves in that sometimes very stressful leadership role?
And it is stressful. And the reason I wrote the book, The Founder's Treadmill, I describe it as kind of a prequel to all the books that I've ever written because um, founders are strong, energetic, hardworking, passionate people, and they're built to survive. They're wired to make sure that business doesn't collapse. Interestingly, it doesn't collapse in the first 2 or 3 years. It collapses closer to around year 10. And the problem is these owners just literally burn themselves out.
Right.
I came close to doing it twice, and all the college notwithstanding, I I didn't see it. Every problem came through me. I had to control every outcome to make sure we didn't fail. And I literally, looking back, realized that I built failure into the system. So so the answer to your question is, you've got to step back and make self-assess is probably a better word. I often talk about stepping off the treadmill. They don't want to do that because it'll impact their ability to survive and take money home to pay the bills. So that they run faster, they work harder, and they trust less. And those are all the wrong directions. What works in the first 2 years doesn't work in years 3 through 10. So what you have to do is empower people. You hire the best that you can, train the best that you can, but you have to trust them. And so you may not trust them with everything, but give them some boundaries, give them room to make decisions, and empower them to think and to use their education and to make a contribution so that on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, you stop working, you turn that treadmill off, you go home, and you decompress for a day or two. I know when I was first starting, I worked 7 days a week. I didn't take a vacation for 7 years. That's not the way to do it. And everybody you hire will feel those pressures, and it is emotionally unsettling. It's disempowering. Eventually, it'll kill the business, and it hurts you physically. It'll hurt your family. The founder's treadmill isn't just a business problem. It's it's a personal problem. And not initially, but it becomes that. And so
Yes.
learn how to trust and build a business that helps you do that.
Oh, I love that. And such important words because we all fall into it and we get excited about what we're doing. We see success and we start going in full bore. That's good. But yes, after a period of time, that's going to fall apart. And that's why being able to transition within the business. I love what you said about what you do in year 1 or 2, your first couple of years is not what you should be doing in years three through 10. That's such an important mindset for founders, especially to be thinking is okay, I'm starting here. A couple of years later, I need to be starting to transition. And if you're not, you're
Yeah.
going to be stuck. You're going to be stuck and
At
probably
some point, you have to get off that
you
treadmill.
do.
And,
Yeah,
and
you just
and
do.
most of the people I've talked to, Sean, don't realize they're on it.
Well, that's the trick. It's that back to what you were talking about earlier, self-awareness. You got to have a little bit of self-awareness. And sometimes you need a consultant to come in with some objective eyes and say, yeah, you're on a treadmill. Let's fix that. So
Yes.
beautiful. All right. Our last question, the fun question, the question I always look forward to. Let's talk about baseball for a minute. Share with us your favorite baseball story.
All right. So, 1968, I was 10 years old. I was attending a parochial school, and it was the first year. Again, my family's all from the southern Michigan area, and so the Detroit Tigers were in the World Series, and they were playing a much better St. Louis Cardinals team. It was going for the first repeat World Series title in many, many decades. And so the Detroit Tigers came in with Denny McClain. I think the first 30 or 31 game winner in the majors in forever. And so it was him up for the Tigers against Bob Gibson for the Cardinals. And farther down the roster as a one of the third or fourth pitchers was Steve Carlton, who was pretty young at the time. What a roster, right? So all the games at that time were in the afternoon. And so I didn't get home from school soon enough to watch most of them. So my brother and I snuck in and got a key transistor radio with a single ear, and throughout math and English classes, we were listening to the game and trying not to cheer, right? And um, the funny outcome of it was, in game one, Bob Gibson just came out and mowed him down. The Cardinals looked like they were going to win it in four. I think he struck out like a World Series record 17 or 18 Tigers in the first game. And we're like, oh, they don't have a chance. But they did. They came back and they came back and they still got down 3-1. And here's the part I always remember. So this second tier, second level pitcher, guy named Mickey Lolish, who still I lived, worked, and I think finally died a few years ago in the state of Michigan. Mickey Lolish comes on and wins 3 World Series games. They were 3 complete games, pitches, right? I mean, three complete games in a period of 9 days.
Wow.
I mean, we will never see the
We
likes
won't.
of that again. And then in game 7, he beat Bob Gibson 4-1. And Bob Gibson said, I read about it afterwards, he said, I think we're the better team, but Mickey Lalish and the Tigers were better today. And that's the only game that counted. It was game 7. And there was no, TV was black and white, radio was AM, but it was the most beautiful sounds in game I ever heard.
Oh, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. And also, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast. I really appreciate you sharing your insights. Best wishes for the book and its success. How can people get a hold of you?
Best place to find me is my author's website, www.davidgrausr.com. And you can find my books, you can find my thinking, my blog posts, my newsletter. It's just a good place to start. If you want to talk, I even have a free 30-minute consultation, and we'll just talk.
Fantastic. Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on whatever podcast method you are watching or listening to. We appreciate the support, and we wish all of you all success in your leadership endeavors. Thanks so much. Have a great day. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.